Hi, I'm Jim Raffle. Welcome to this episode of the Jim and Shelby Show, All Things Print Podcast. I'm joined as always by
Shelby Sapusik. How are you today, Jim?
I am good. And what are we going to do this week? We're going to do something a little different, right?
Well, this is kind of going right along with the color management professionals fundamentals classes that we're teaching both online and in person yet this year. And so we wanted to kind of do, I don't know, a little tease to what we would be doing in class. And so one thing we talk about is there's just some really simple things you can do in your process without even profiling that can improve your color.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we're not going to show you slides, and we're not going to go through slide decks like we do in the actual coursework. This would be more what I call some of the bonus content. We oftentimes will jump out of the slide decks and show people either photographs of work we've done or how to make settings in specific applications. So let's start with I guess the first thing that you should really do to improve your color and print quality overall, pretty much no matter what you're doing. I mean, this is going to help you if you're not doing it, right?
Well, that's what we always tell people, and we've run into this ourselves. Let me see if I can share my screen because this is
Well, while you're waiting, so what Shelby is going to show you is what's called a nozzle check. Mine's kind of hard to see because it's you can see it a little bit. So there we go. If I get close enough to the camera. So this is a nozzle check. And what's nice about this particular manufacturer, I think this is a Muto printer. It puts the date and time on there, and then it shows you, this happens to have CMYK and several light inks. And this is a dye sub. That's why it's so light, and it's on a kind of a uncoated type paper. It shows you if all your nozzles are firing, right? There we go. Shelby's got a little better one here. So this,
so
go ahead.
yeah, this is actually vinyl, right?
Yes, this was
I believe it was,
yep, this was 3M vinyl. Yep.
yeah.
And
And
I think an
as you
Epson printer. Yeah.
yeah, as you can see, we were actually having a little bit of trouble printing on this one, and so we did two nozzle checks at the beginning just to make sure that it wasn't the nozzles. And we always talk about how color management is about crossing out variables that could go wrong. And even though we were seeing some issues, I think we went through and forwarded this media on the roll, and we were able to see that. I'm not sure if it was because the machine had been sitting for a long time, that media had been sitting for a long time, but once we did that, we started getting better prints. But we were able to, I guess, cross out the possibility that we had a problem with our nozzles by doing a couple nozzle checks.
Yep. And that's the whole point, is that you want to minimize variables, stabilize the system before you start making your profile. And this is really an important first step. The other thing you can do, which we don't have a sample of handy, but if you have a bidirectional printer, which is what most people have, and you're using it in a bidirectional mode, then you probably want to run a bidirectional alignment test and just make sure that your dots are laying down correctly, regardless of which direction that print head is going. The big clue that you're having a problem with that is if you start looking at your test prints or your color swatches as they're coming off while you're profiling. If they have fuzzy edges specifically on the left and the right, or if the type becomes difficult to read, it's probably a bidirectional head alignment issue. It's super easy to test for. Just go into your RIP and change from bidirectional to unidirectional. And if that goes away, then you know your printer needs a bidirectional head alignment. So those two those go hand in hand. And they can both have a pretty big impact on color and color fidelity, color quality. And if you're going to take the time to build a profile, it makes sense to make sure your printer is operating as best it can. So that's number one. Number two, I think you get to share your screen again.
I'll do that again. One second.
Is settings in your design side applications, and specifically color management settings. So Shelby's going to share again, and I think she's on InDesign, it looks like.
Yep. This is InDesign, and it's the same base. They have a little bit different screens, but it's the same in Illustrator and Photoshop. So what I'm showing here is I just opened up a document, and what I can do is go to edit and color settings. You'll find that that's the same in Corel Draw. That's the same where you would find it. And I can set up a custom and save it as a preset. But as you can see, when you first open up, and I reset this so that it would show this, if this was the first time I was opening up InDesign or Illustrator or Photoshop, this is pretty much what I would get. I would get my RGB working space as sRGB and my CMYK working space as US web coded swap. Down here, I am not preserving it. Well, I'm preserving my embedded here, but I would probably want to go to preserve embedded profiles here. I am in my relative colorimetric and rendering intent, which Jim, I think, is going to talk about a little bit more. But what I really wanted to show you is right here. We suggest, if you are working with print, and this is kind of set up for their web clients. Most of their clients are digital. So sRGB is great for web-related work, but for our industry, I'm trying to see it on my small screen here. Why am I missing it? I don't even see it. Am I missing it?
Yeah, where's your Adobe RGB?
Oh,
there it is.
Ta-da! Adobe RGB 1998. So one of those fun Adobe tricks, you have to scroll up sometimes. And then for this, we want to change it to Grackle. And that's right here. So this would be our ideal settings. When you're first starting out, we also recommend you check these boxes. That way, when a file comes in, like from one of your clients, it'll warn you right away. It says, hey, this isn't an Adobe RGB 1998. Do you want to change it? Do you want to keep it? And you can make a decision on a case-by-case basis.
And the reason that you want to select those profiles up at the top, the Adobe RGB 1998 and the Grackle 2006, there's a variety of reasons, and we talk about those in the CMP class. But the short answer is that those are larger gamuts. So you're providing access to a greater number of colors for your designers. And then in the case of the CMYK one, the coded Grackle, that is actually the first gray balance profile that was available publicly. And it just means that you're going to have better gray balance, more than likely. There's other things involved, obviously, and also about a 10 to 15% bigger gamut than that swap gamut that was selected by default. Yep.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing again, and I'm going to let you take it away.
Sure. So part of that, so that's the design side. The other thing that comes into play is your production side. And so here I've got a Caldera rip, and I've already loaded a job into my printer queue. And so right here, I have this option to click on the color palette, and that's my color settings. So these settings are specific either to this printer or to this job. So right now, because there is a job loaded, it's telling me what came in with this job. So here, it's telling me that this file has an embedded profile, and it happens to be Grackle 2006. And so that means that we are honoring that embedded profile as Grackle 2006. Let me close that and close this. Let me just reopen that printer with no job installed. And if I look at the color settings, then again, this is for this printer. I have Caldera Gray as my gray balance profile, and then I have Adobe 1998, so that matches up with what Shelby has, and then I had Grackle 2006, so that matches up, and I have this color metric with black point for my rendering intent, so that matched up too. And so really the key is that you want to match up the defaults in your RIP to the defaults in your Adobe application. So again, here's color metric rendering intent with that black point turned, well, there should be a place to, oh, actually we want color metric with black point is what we want right here. And that's what we had down here. Oh, that's the simulation. So we do have this set correctly here. And so that's for my printer. And then many RIPs will also have an area where you can configure essentially your overall defaults. And we've set those as well to match up, because in the printer, one of the things you can say is, hey, just use the defaults from the whole system. And so there's a whole bunch of different ways to do this. The key is that you want to make sure you're matching up the rendering intents and the profiles from your design side with your production side. So the other thing I can share with you is somewhere over here. I've got Photoshop. Should have Photoshop running. There we go. All right. Hopefully that's big enough. It's about as big as I can make it. So right now, this would be displayed with my defaults, but I honored my embedded profile, which is sRGB, and that you can see that actually down here, very small, but it's sRGB, which is fine because I wanted to honor my embedded profile, and I'll show you why in just a second. What we can do is we can soft proof, and so I can go into my proof setup, and I can say customize. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you a couple things. I have CRPC 6 here, which is essentially Grackle 2006. Don't let that deter you. It's just some terminology differences. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off this black point compensation and watch what happens to the image. Does everyone see how much darker that gets? And you lose a lot of shadow detail when it's off. And so that gives you...
Concentrate on the bottom of the image where the gray and red of that plastic flooring is. You can really see it there.
Yep. And so that's one of the reasons that you want to use the black point compensation if you're using relative. The other thing you can do is you can use perceptual. And perceptual, you can see, and then let's turn off black point. Perceptual is very similar with and without black point. It makes a small difference. Generally, when you're using perceptual, you do not use black point. We talk way more about the differences between these. Many times, if your RIP doesn't have black point, we'll tell people to try perceptual as a way to resolve that problem if you're losing detail. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this all set up. But what I'm going to do is pick a different CMYK profile. So this is what happens with a smaller gamut profile when you turn off that black point compensation. And I think everyone can see what's going on there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there, your option would be, you can also do this perceptual, and you can see that that does something similar. The problem with perceptual is if you watch, if I go back to relative, it actually changes the color, it lightens everything up. And that's one of the issues with perceptual that we do talk about in the CMP class. So that's why you'd want to take the class to get more information than we can provide in a, I don't know, 15, 20-minute podcast. Mm-hmm. So let's review. One, you want to do your nozzle checks and your bidirectional head alignments, right?
Yep.
Two was what you showed them.
Color management settings. And we should mention that you want those, ideally, you want the color management settings to match between your design software and your RIP software. Correct.
And then the third thing is part of the color management settings is your rendering intents. And a lot of times if you're having problems, like if you're getting problems like I was showing you there with that last profile with the relative rendering intent where you were losing shadow detail, you can either try turning on that black point compensation if that's available in your RIP, or you can try switching to perceptual. So there's a quick tip we just gave you that you don't have to build a new profile and you might be able to solve a color problem.
Yep. And so often, I think the reason we pick these three things is because they often come up when we're out on a gig with our clients and we make these little changes and they're just like, wow, that fixed everything. Well, it doesn't always fix everything, but it makes it enough of a difference where, one little checkbox can make such a difference in your color quality sometimes.
And these are fixes that you don't have to bring in a consultant for, and you can try very quickly and get results or not. But I mean, these are all things that you can try in your shop today if you're having, problems like the ones we were showing you.
Yep.
All right.
So our CMP classes, we should talk about when they're coming up. First one is online and it's live and online. So it's not just, you buy a recording. You get Jim and myself talking through these presentations and answering your questions live and getting you prepared to take the online certification test so that you can become a certified digital color professional. So that one, the first one's in July 13th. I believe it's 9 to 4 or 9 to 5 Eastern. We have another live online one that we're doing in October. So it's a repeat class. That's October 5th. And then right now we have one that we're doing in December, right? Do we want to talk about that? I think we've decided it's going to be December 5th and 6th, and we're partnering with Cover Digital Specialists in Miami.
Yeah, at their what they call their Cover Center, which is a training and testing center for their inks. So yeah, it's very. We're looking forward to that one. It's pretty far out, and schedules change, things change, but at the moment, yes, that is on the books. And
Yeah, our July one's coming up very quickly, but those other two, even though they're far out, all three of these classes are available to register online already. So if you go to colorcasters.com and go to training and color management training, you can find these classes and take a look. It has a lot more information, talks about what we're going to go through at these classes. You get to decide whether you want to do something online or in person. The in-person one is a 2-day format, and we do not so much, I guess, hands-on, but a lot more demonstration, and the class gets involved.
And then I thought we should let people know, since we are going to publish this, you may be listening to this as soon as Friday, June 9th. And on Tuesday, June 13th, I will be in Las Vegas for one day only. And I will be at the Licensing Expo, I believe is what it's called. But if you're in Las Vegas and you want to talk color, feel free to reach out, and I will see if we can schedule something to get together. And then I think that's about it for trade shows. I mean, it's probably a little too soon to talk about UV Energize in September,
Yes,
but we'll definitely talk about that more on the next episode.
absolutely.
Okay. Anything else?
I don't think so. Thanks for joining us today.
All right. Well, then we will see you next time.